We've seen Red Bull recover from some bad Fridays plenty of times, but I'm not sure that they've ever looked this bad. Take a look at the results from FP2 of the soft tyre runs. Lando Norris, quickest, 15.624, very good lap. A bit ragged in a couple of places, ran wide, 1 point going into the last corner. I say ran wide, it was a classic Lando thing, using all the road, no early turn in, no short corners for Lando going into that last turn. And he was doing a transitory turn, actually, moving to the left and then just flicking to the right on the entry and caught the left rear, caught an edge really on the left rear, picked up the dust and ran wide in front of George Russell, who was quite amused, I think. And similarly had a couple of other incidents locking up and so forth, but nonetheless really good. We'll get onto his lap in a minute. Oscar Piastri 0.3 slower, as you can see. Ferrari looking good. Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton not bad. Lewis did that time on very used tyres. Again, we'll get onto that in a second. And the two Aston Martins, pretty impressive. Lance Stroll, Fernando Alonso, and in FP1 when Fernando had a bit of a crook back, his place was taken by Felipe Drugovich, an opportunity for Felipe to show his talent. Good to see that. Good to see Aston immediately putting him in the car. Third driver, perfect use of a third driver. And just for the record, he was 0.3 slower than Lance Stroll on a day when Lance Stroll was going very well in the other Aston. So good job by Felipe Drugovich. George Russell, not brilliant in the Mercedes, not bad. I mean, they're there or thereabouts, so probably get better. Kimi Antonelli not too far away on a circuit where there are no really quick corners or long quick corners. Pretty near George in everything he's doing. Isaac Hadjar, good. We haven't got to Lewis yet. Oh, that's Yuki Tsunoda. What's he doing there? 16.4. Not bad for Yuki, you could say. About where you'd expect him to be. Then Oliver Behrman, Nico Hulkenberg, Esteban Ocon. And finally, Max Verstappen, 16.791. Over a second slower than Lando Norris around a relatively short lap, the Hungaroring, which is all about downforce, traction to some extent, couple of quick corners, where Max actually looked very good. And it's a classic Max day, really, because if you followed him on board and listened to his radio, well, not listen to the radio, if you followed him on board, he looked very good in the car, as ever, disguising everything that was going on. Lovely turn-ins, everything nice. But in reality, as he reported it, driving as if he was on ice, no grip, front or rear. They tried to make some changes between the two sessions, the morning session and the afternoon one, and found about a tenth of a second, whereas Lando, just for reference, who was quickest also in the morning, went half a second quicker in the afternoon. So Red Bull obviously struggling. Max saying after the qualifying session, I'm very sure we'll get it right Saturday, Sunday. Well, we'll wait and see. This is a big gap that he's got to fill. But I suppose if you wanted some positive signs, you could look at turn 11, which is a corner I mentioned in the build-up to this race. A very quick right-hander leading onto the back straight downhill. And it's an impressive corner. 6 gear, they don't change down for that corner. And the only 3 drivers that I saw all afternoon who did not brake going in there were the 2 McLaren drivers, no surprise there, and Max Verstappen. The problem is that Max was actually lifting at a much lower speed, about 6 kilometres slower approach speed from what he'd been doing coming through the S's than the 2 McLaren drivers, slowing down to about the same speed as the 2 McLaren drivers. So you can't say it was quite as impressive, but Max looking really good there anyway. If you didn't know what the actual speeds were, you'd think, wow, Max Verstappen's quick in the Red Bull. But he wasn't over the lap. Very impressive corner though, good to see. Let's have a look also now at the sectors. That tells its own story as well. Lando Norris, quickest in Sector 2, which is all the tight bits at the top of the hill. Change of direction, looking very fluid there, as ever. Lando always does in Hungary. Oscar Piastri, quickest in Sector 3. But look who was quickest in Sector 1 on those quite scrubbed Pirelli softs. Everybody did 2 runs, but Lewis did sort of 2.5 runs. And on that last run, the last quick run, quickest in Sector 1, and not too bad thereafter. The tyres going away after that. So Lewis Hamilton looking, I thought he looked very good today. You could see going into the last corner, it's definitely the old Lewis getting in on the front end, shortening the corner in the way that Max is doing that, in the way that Charles, very difficult to tell the difference between Charles and Lewis going in there actually, if you just watch what they're doing, the trajectory and the way they're going in, the throttle application and how they're turning in, very, very similar going into the last corner. And that's a really good sign. And the other interesting point is that Lewis and Charles exactly the same speed through the trap at the start finish line. Well, over the start finish line, 269 in 7th gear as they were starting their quickest laps. And that 269 commensurate with Oscar Piastri, a little bit slower than Lando Norris. Lando just really quick through there. But Max Verstappen at the same place at the beginning of his lap, 264, when he gave himself a really good run, and at the end of his lap, 263. So that just shows, and it's an interesting start finish line placement because that does reflect the exit speed, or some partial or a partial representative of the exit speed from the last corner. And you can just see how much time Max is losing just on sheer grip out of that last corner. It's astonishing to see how much sheer grip, grunt, whatever you want to call it, downforce grunt, Red Bull have lost since the halcyon days, which weren't too long ago. So difficult times for Red Bull, that is for sure. And to put a full stop on all that talk about the grip on the Red Bull, just going back to the sectors, of course you've got to put a division after Yuki Tsunoda to get way down to Max Verstappen. But look at that, 28.022, Yuki 27.848, sector 1. Max and Yuki about the same sector 2. Yuki slightly quicker in terms of a hundredth. And then Yuki again slightly quicker, sector 3, and whichever way you cut it, massively slower than the McLarens and even the Ferraris. Max is saying he's confident the car will be good tomorrow, so yeah, let's wait and see. And now let's have a look at the terminal velocities at the end of the pit straight, just before the braking area into 1, on their quickest laps. Lewis Hamilton quickest in the straight line, so again, starting to look quite good for Lewis this weekend. Quickest in sector 1. That top speed advantage obviously helping him to be quickest in sector 1, as we saw. Not far away from Charles on scrub tyres, on very used tyres, 324. He went off a bit as well, but he's got all that out of his system now on a Friday, I presume. Charles Leclerc 322. Both the Ferraris looking very good in terms of a compromise grip versus top speed. George Russell and Kimi Antonelli right there as well in the Mercedes. They seem to have got their downforce versus grip set up pretty right. Then Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri slower than both Ferrari and Mercedes in a straight line. So McLaren just have, again, so much downforce that they are a little bit slower in a straight line. But will it make any difference? I very much doubt it. They are that quick over the lap. And then look at that. Max Verstappen 315, Yuki Tsunoda 318. That and Yuki Tsunoda being quickest over the start-finish line, markedly quicker than Max, 270, 271 against Max's 263. Suggests that at the moment Yuki's been running a little less wing than Max Verstappen. Right at the beginning of FP2, Max did 1 lap, said the car was not good at all. They brought him in, they put 3 clicks on the front wing, and I never saw them take that out of the car, so he was running a lot of wing, and even then he kept complaining about the car feels as if it's on ice, it's got nothing going on, he can't feel the car. Didn't look that way, as I say, from the outside. There was also a bit of a weird incident for Max as well when we saw him slowing, pulling to the right coming out of turn 1 and throwing a Red Bull rag out of the car, a towel actually. It turns out that he'd had that towel while he was sitting in the garage wiping sweat and doing various things, and it had been left inadvertently between his legs, and it blew out when he started to pick up speed. It shouldn't have been in the cockpit at all, of course. And rather than have it sort of move around in the cockpit and go down to the footwell area, Max pulled over and threw it out. No doubt expecting he was going to get, I don't know what, a €50 fine for littering or something like that. But no, there was a different FIA interpretation to that, which was that the car had been given an unsafe release. It shouldn't have been released with that towel in it. Good point, actually. But it wasn't quite the same as leaving a block of wood in there or something like that. So he was given a reprimand for that. But an interesting thing to see that towel. I mean, it takes me back to the days when drivers often used to have rags around them, and they used them for visors and various lucky rags as well. Alan Jones had one. Mario Andretti had one. And back in the 50s and 60s, most drivers had them because you needed them just to wipe everything. They didn't have strip-off visors then, of course. So that was it, really. McLaren, no surprise to see them looking so good. They will probably continue to hold that position throughout tomorrow, going into the race, and then in the race, very difficult to overtake. But there could, of course, be some racing between Oscar and Lando. Have we ever seen that in Hungary before? Oh, yeah, I think we have. And there was actually a weird moment in FP2 when they were on fuel, actually, when they were on medium tyres. And we just saw Lando all locked up, about to T-bone Oscar, going into turn 1. Quite sure what that was all about, but it was kind of role reversal of what we'd seen in the Grand Prix last year, of course, where Oscar off the line left his braking really late and nearly ran into Lando and Max Verstappen. It was only because Lando moved and then Max moved that Oscar didn't hit anything. If he had, history would have been completely different, of course. Anyway, that was weird to see that, but I don't know. Maybe that's a portent of what we're going to see on Sunday. So the Hungaroring looking spruce, looking good, modernised. This is the 40th running of the Hungarian Grand Prix as a World Championship event. Of course, we did have Hungarian Grand Prix in the 30s, and we've had races in Budapest since then in the 1960s. But the first time at the Hungaroring was 1986, when the race was won by Nelson Piquet with a valiant pass around the outside of Ayrton Senna into turn one, the two Brazilians going at it. Anyway, we'll see what happens tomorrow for qualifying going into the Hungarian Grand Prix. Qualifying really important in Hungary, incredibly difficult to overtake. As we keep saying, no driver ever wins from the middle of the grid, do they, in Hungary? Michael Schumacher, Nigel Mansell, can be done, and of course the weather could play a role in addition. A big thanks to OEM Exclusive, to Track Ninja, to Jetcraft, and of course to REC Watches. See you tomorrow.